Masterclass.
There's a change happening in the way we live, the way we work, the way we spend our money and make our decisions. We are evolving to be more conscious in our actions in a way that serves the world and makes it a better place. Welcome to the Ethical Evolution. The Ethical Evolution podcast is brought to you by Ethical Change Agency. I'm Bindi, I'm the founder, and my mission is to help ethical entrepreneurs and holistic healers to find their voice through spiritual coaching and podcasting. I'm honoured to bring you the stories of those who create change through healing, kindness, innovation, purpose, and spirit. Understanding that to create collective change, we need to be the change. It all begins with us. Hey, before we get into this episode, I just wanted to let you know that you can now grab my album of guided meditations. It's called Sourced by Spirit, and it's on all streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Tidal, YouTube Music, and many more. There's 11 guided meditations ranging from 4 minutes through to 10 minutes to help you reset your mind and your body at any time. Okay, now let's get on with the show. The last time we caught up with Brian Bogert was in episode 170 in October 2023. Brian is a heart surgeon without a blade. He doesn't start outside with what you need to do, he starts inside with who you are. In a world that is disconnected, Brian is revolutionizing how organizations and entrepreneurs deeply connect with their authentic selves to achieve the highest levels of wealth in monetary riches, time, relationships, and health. At just 7 years old, Brian was faced with a traumatic injury that most of us can barely even imagine. He was run over by a truck and his left arm was severed from his body. After years of intensive rehabilitation and over 24 surgeries, Brian has a deep-lived understanding of how physical, emotional, and mental pain can keep people buried, regardless of what their initial trauma was. His belief that everyone's story is as important as his own is what makes him one of the most accessible, relatable, and authentic individuals you'll ever meet. It's also why we have him back. Brian is back by popular demand on the Ethical Evolution to help bring us a masterclass in taking out our trash, connecting with ourselves, and unlocking the secrets to resilience. Welcome back, Brian, to the Ethical Evolution.
Dude, I'm so happy to be here with you today.
We've just been chatting off air and we could do this all day, I reckon. You know, I hope one day we end up in the same room and we actually get that opportunity because it is going to be magic.
Yeah, and so I think that we need to take it beyond just hope and realize that at some point it's going to happen and we just need to facilitate that.
I think somehow our paths are going to twist further and it's going to end up, we're going to, you know, propel each other forward creatively in some aspect. But yeah, we're here for a reason. And I've invited you back on the podcast by popular demand. I must say I got such incredible feedback on the last episode I did with you. And as you know, I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of people from around the world in my years. And there's no one like you. No one like you. And I mean that in a good way. Yeah, you have left a mark. You have left an impact.
Well, you're making a mark on me right now. I fully receive that, my friend. Truly, I'm getting chills as we're sitting here talking, and I'm receiving that message from you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and saying it the way that you did.
No problem at all. Now, I was absolutely moved the last time we spoke, and your story for people that haven't heard it. Well, I'm not going to take you through rehashing that again, but people will leave a link to the previous episode so you can hear Brian's story, which is absolutely remarkable. And And some of the things I've brought you back for, because you're an incredible coach. You help people transform their lives and take their trash out in all forms. And just as a sort of a recap on who you are and what you do you want to give us those cliff notes, and then we'll dive into this little masterclass we want to give people?
I'll give some cliff notes. The thing I always have to start with is that I'm a husband and father first. It's the only thing binary in my world. I always lead with that today because I've said that for years, but I wasn't always congruent with it. And it really is my number one priority in life. So I just live that way now. If you look at who I am, I'm deeply fascinated in the human experience. I've been studying human behavior, human connection, human performance for 20 to 25 years. And frankly, largely because of interest, but also largely because of need and survival. When I was 7, I was run over by a truck and my left arm was completely severed from my body, reattached, 24 surgeries, and a whole ripple effect that you can listen to the waves and evolution in my story in the last episode. But ultimately what it did was, I believe this was my transformation story. And the reality of it is it's the story that really created a lot of trash from my past that I pushed through and pushed down for years. And so I dealt with deep levels of shame, deep levels of anger, both of which almost cost me everything and everyone I ever cared about. And I was unconscious to it for years. I also realized that when I shut off physical pain, because it exceeded my ability to cope, I shut off mental pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain for 20 to 25 years, and I didn't know it. And so on my 12 to 13 year awareness and healing journey, since I started to really step into awareness around it, today I live very, very clearly and am known by a couple of nicknames. One is the Garbage Man, which goes along with our branding. But the other two are, I'm referred to as a heart surgeon without a blade and the 1-second psychologist. And ultimately, what I do in the world today is that I help heart-centered impact makers identify and remove the waste they don't even know exists within. And ultimately be able to step fully into their power and potential to create the ripple effect of impact that they desire. And ultimately live the lives that they want, sometimes for the first times ever. So there's a lot more I know we're going to go into, but that's like the high level because ultimately I'm on a path to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as we can by reducing the level of suffering that exists on this planet. And I do that by fulfilling on my purpose, which is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs.
And I love that. And I love the 1 minute psychologist or psychiatrist, whichever you want to call it. But because you drop some absolute nuggets, mate. Absolutely. And it's just like, oof. And they hit hard. And that's why you're back here with us. Now, we're talking trash. I'm not talking of high performing people here, right? But I'm talking to the average Joes who are listening, if we want to identify as that. All of us are carrying some trash, whether we want to admit it or not. We can think we're evolved humans, we can think we're healed humans, but largely we're hurt humans, aren't we? Mm-hmm. And how can we dig a little deeper to find that trash we got to take to the curb?
Yeah. I think the very first place to start is that we have to be able to remove the shame and blame from the trash from our past. And what do I mean by that? So many people are afraid to lean into the dark moments and afraid to lean into the internal work because they've always felt at fault for something, right? It's their reason, their contribution. And so what I often say, and I want to say this right out of the gate, the trash from your past is not your fault. It just becomes your responsibility once you become aware of it or you start burying others in yours. Now, I got challenged on that earlier for the first time ever. Literally, I was on another show with a good friend of mine earlier today, and he said, but is it really not their fault, Brian? Right? And what I had to really bring this back to was the situation that I had with my wife, which I was unconscious to the level of anger that I was existing with for literally a decade. And it doesn't make any sense why I was. She tried to bring it to me 1,000,000 times, but I was never in a place to receive it because I was so armored, so protected, and therefore disconnected. And so the first place we have to start is it's not your fault. The guy who actually was in the truck, it's a great example of what I mean by this. Is it technically his fault that I got hit and run over? Absolutely. But it was an accident. and an innocent mistake that any one of us could have made when his foot slipped off of the brake pedal and hit the gas, right? Now, he turmoiled and tormented himself for the remainder of his life on that. I wished I would have had the chance to meet him to alleviate him of this pressure. But the biggest thing that I always say is we have to not look at it from shame and blame and find a way to view ourselves, our stories, and our situations as objectively and non-judgmentally as we possibly can. Because that's when we can start to actually evaluate the intellectual and emotional narratives, right? What are we feeling? What are we thinking? What belief systems do we have that have only been further validated by all the patterns that have been created in our life? And start to deconstruct them in a way that we can update them to our current reality, right? What do I mean by this? And I want to just give a really clear example. I referenced the anger with my wife. I think I said this on the last episode because it's one of my favorite examples, because there's not a relationship or anyone who's in a relationship in this world who doesn't understand some dynamic like this, right? And she ultimately would say something really simple like this: "Hey, honey, what do you want to do with the kids this weekend?" But my shame and my anger filter caused me to hear it this way: "Hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father here recently, so what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend?" Right? I was unconscious to the fact that I'm reacting and protecting the fact that I always said that being a husband and a father is the most important thing to me. I was protecting and defending the fact that the idea that I would do anything that would make my wife and my kids feel anything other than safe and protected just still to this day, like, gets me, right? But what would happen in that moment? I'm reacting. I'm reacting to the cellular memory inside of me that told me that people wouldn't see me, understand me, know my truth. And now all of a sudden I feel like I'm being challenged by my partner in the area that I define as the most important in my life. So what do? I rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last 4 days to show her I'm a good husband and father, because I cared about being right, not about getting it right. And so the normal average Joe, are you reacting in moments with people that you love? Are you carrying negativity, low frequency, yucky energy with you for any period of time that's longer than minutes and moments? Are you finding yourself not able to see the light, live and exist in joy, freedom, and fulfillment? Is there interference or repeat patterns that you feel like you can't ever escape? If you do, you've got trash. And here's the truth about all of this. I've yet to meet a human being, to your point earlier, Bindi, I've yet to meet a human being who does not have trash from their past. And I don't care how healed we are, right? I can sit here and give really clear, pragmatic example of healing and congruence and the impact. Why? Because I operated in daily physical pain for nearly 31 years. I'm going on a year and 25 days right now with zero physical pain.
Amazing.
It was a manifestation of the spiritual, mental, and emotional that I had not healed. Now, the reality of it is I've gone to deep, deep, deep levels of healing. I've done a ton of consciousness work, but I'm also human. And I've got physical, mental, and emotional, and spiritual, if you want to get really woo-woo, narratives that show up in my world. And what is important for me is to be able to recognize that they all tell me the truth, and they also all lie to me. And so it's about reconciling what is true to me in this moment and realizing that 99% of the time I was reacting to things that had nothing to do with what was right in front of me. And so that's the case as well for humanity. Average Joe, high performer or not, our world is a toxic, shame-based fishbowl that keeps us trapped if we're not careful, right? I want people to recognize there is way more possibility and way more opportunity to live the lives that we want and desire on our terms than most of us believe there is.
And this is it, Brian, isn't it? Like, we sometimes just don't have the consciousness of how we react to something. Like, we're just bang, and it's gone. And then we're like, shit, I shouldn't have done that. And then you sort of catch yourself after the moment. But if we can just slow down, like I'm not sure whether I had this conversation with you last time, but I've had it with many people. It's just taking a breath before you react.
Oh, it's huge.
Just take a breath and just be like, hang on, where's this coming from? Where's this reaction coming from? And just stop yourself and going, why am I feeling this? Where am I feeling this? What's going on? Just so that you can have a self-awareness about yourself. And I know it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but trust me, if you can find the root of where that's coming from, there's your chance to pull that root out and throw it in the trash.
That's exactly right. And until you get to the source of the root, you won't escape it, right? And so what you just outlined, we have 3 questions that we teach people, right? And it's in the moment of trigger. Now, sometimes we need to get people to really understand what does that moment of trigger actually feel like in their body physiologically, right? Most people can define it with an emotion or some physical sensation, but they don't actually slow down long enough to even recognize the patterns of what's happening with their heart rate, what's happening with their breath rate, what's happening with any tension anywhere in their body. And often those cellular reactionary moments show up the same for us. So if we can get into the moment of recognizing when we're triggered before we react, we can pause and ask 3 questions. The very first is what I'm reacting to right now due to what's right in front of me or the trash from my past? Here's a little secret, 99% of the time it's the second one. But why is it so important to ask that question? Because it helps separate in the moment, right? It helps separate in the moment to really understand what we're reacting to. Now, the second question is, what am I protecting right now? See, the reaction is coming from an armor-based energy, a self-protective based energy, because we need to defend, we're afraid of criticism, judgment, whatever that's going to... So what am I protecting in this moment, right? I gave you the example of what I was protecting in the reaction with my wife, but we can unpack that for anybody in any environment, and we can ultimately get to the source of what is actually causing the reaction. And if those 2 questions don't create enough separation for you to start to neutralize in the moment, then the last one is, am I safe right now? Because if you can answer that question definitively, then you can realize I don't need to be operating from an armored, defensive, protective energy. I can open myself to what's right in front of me. I do want to go back to say one thing, though, because you said, you're like, man, we'll react, and then you're like, shit, I shouldn't have said that. I have to call attention to this because should is a shame-based word.
Exactly.
It implies whoever you are and whatever you're doing, it's not good enough, and it immediately lowers your frequency into the shame and blame game. And so even that one word, I'm on a process of trying to bring awareness to eradicating it from our language and replacing it with could or would. Because I haven't found a situation that one of those 2 words can't replace it, but they don't carry the same low frequency energy that should does. And it's even that right there, catching it to say, look, that's a shame and blame cycle. That's the separation to realize that the trash from my past is not my fault, right? That's the most important piece for us to be able to remove before we actually have a chance to heal.
You just reminded me of a bit of a situation I've had in my life recently where I had someone rather difficult who made me so angry. Like we used to have a really good relationship, and they've become a little bit too big for their boots, and they've completely changed. And so I was like, what's going on here? Why am I reacting this way? I actually stopped because I was just getting so pissed off and I was getting really angry, and I was hanging on to that. And I was like, why am I doing this? And I'm like, this is not my brand. This is not what I do. And I was acting in complete opposite of everything I stand for. And I kind of went, you've got a choice here. What if you flipped it and you did the opposite of what they expected you to do? And I did. I went in completely calm. Even my voice was completely calm so that they didn't react to me in a different way. Instead of going off,
That's right.
I went in calm and the whole situation changed. They just were like, everything went my way. And I was like, well, look at that. All I had to do was flip it the other way and let go of all the shit. It doesn't matter.
The reality of it is the second we step into truth, we eliminate a lot of the friction and interference, right? And the moment we step into ownership and the moment that we can lower our own armor, it opens us to what's possible. What you just described there is a really real dynamic, right? Anger is armored energy. It's literally energy that's designed to protect you, to push everyone and everything away from you. And so what's crazy is how often we operate from these positions of anger and fear, but they're actually taking us further away from what we want. And so in this scenario, I've been described as being the master of difficult conversations. But what's really interesting is I don't view them as difficult conversations anymore because I know how to diffuse them. Because I don't have ego at this point in my life that I'm aware of. I'm not going to tell you that I don't have any other work to do. Shit, I'm learning stuff every day. But I don't believe that I'm operating at all from a protectionary or an ego-based energy at all anymore, which helps me stand in what we call the strong spine and soft front, which I know we unpacked on the last episode. But in a reminder for everybody, it's I know who I am, what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, my heart, my intent, my desires, my boundaries, my worth, my value, which means I can be unwavering in any environment, which means I don't need to protect myself, which means I can facilitate a room or an interaction or a discussion that completely changes the paradigm on what people are expecting. And we get closer together as a result of it.
And that energy that you put out as well as what you get back. Like if you're putting out a calm, assertive energy instead of a really angry, pissed off energy, you're going to get met with the same. So it's really, finding that balance and putting out what you want to get back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny because it's like do unto others like you want done to you, right? Like it is really, that's the old adage that we hear. But there's a lot of truth to people are reacting and responding as well, even with intentional response towards the energy that either is being delivered and directed towards them, or like in my case where I referenced with my wife, my own armor was diluting the energy that I was getting and causing me to believe it was something that it wasn't. And both cause issues, and they both cause levels of disruption and disconnection and interactions that don't need to be there. But again, what are our nervous systems designed to do? Anticipate threat, anticipate risk, keep us safe, right? And most of us haven't done the work necessary to update our operating systems to even understand what that looks like in our current world. It's not the same as it used to be. And most of the time, and I want to be respectful to the fact that there are parts of the world right now that there's real physical risk, right? There's war zones, there's famish, there's like all these things. But many first world countries now, physical risk is not a concern. So we're talking about mental, emotional, and spiritual more than anything. And that's what we're reacting and protecting. That doesn't require armor. It requires connection and conversation.
I love that reference there to updating your operating system. I mean, we humans, we don't love doing the work, do we? Like, and I talk about doing the work a lot on this show. And it's something that, just like any other aspect of our life, you want to go to the gym, you want to be fit, you want to eat better. It's another thing. Your mind, your spiritual connection with yourself. It all takes work, and like we're carrying this trash, and if we want to deal with it, you got to do the work.
Well, it comes full circle to even the first concept that I started to teach formally, and it's still one of our flagship signature areas. It's where I've given tons of keynotes as well historically. It's the concept of embracing pain to avoid suffering, right? And I believe that it's necessary for us to embrace pain to avoid suffering, and it's the only way we gain freedom. I mean, we have a framework around the whole concept because it's just that. It's like how often people are avoidant of things that actually might seem in the short term like they're really difficult, but they're also the only pathway to actually create the lives and the freedom that we want, right? We don't pause and slow down long enough to acknowledge and understand the suffering we wish to avoid. We rarely identify the pains that we tend to avoid and learn to embrace them. And certainly we don't establish this as a habit for everything in our lives. But truly, we hear about this concept of getting uncomfortable, doing the work, right? Discomfort's kind of the 5K to pain's marathon, right? And pain is I believe that we all must choose our pain or our suffering will choose us. And so I'd rather be in the driver's seat to land in the places in life that I desire and to choose the pain that I want because, man, suffering takes you away from everything.
Exactly. And on that note, when we circle back to our triggers and what's making us react this way, there will be people listening that will go, yeah, what bullshit? Really? I can't, this isn't my fault. They're carrying that shame, which comes to resilience. And this is one of the things that I also wanted to talk to you about is, you and I have been through incredible things in our lives and you in particular for many, many years were trying to heal and recover from a horrific accident. And there's many others like us in the world. What is it that keeps you getting up and not quitting?
That's a deep answer for me. It's to honor life in its most simple sense. My actions for a long time were driven in gratitude and appreciation, and how I used to say I was forever indebted to the woman who saved my life. That wasn't my mom, because my mom saved my life too. But the nurse that came out of the store and actually stopped the bleeding on the main wound, stopped my arm, and I know I shared with you that I met her for the very first time on the 30th anniversary of the accident. You know, her choice to go into action head first into a literal life and limb trauma that she witnessed and didn't even hesitate, when her counterpart and friend, who had all the same training, all the same qualifications, turned her head and went home. Now, what I want to be clear on is I don't have any negative energy towards her friend. She had every right to do that. But that single choice has now had a ripple effect of impact in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives, through my ability to still be here, happy, healthy, and productive. You know, I was given a lot of perspective early in life because I started to feel sorry for myself when I was in the ICU for those first few days. And then when I started to realize that I'm surrounded by kids that have terminal illnesses and don't know if they're going to live for another 30 days, it's a pretty strong lesson in perspective. And over the course of probably 13-ish years after my injury, there were a variety of people that I had done work with in the hospital, done philanthropic fundraising with, done motivational type work with, who are no longer here. In fact, I lost a very, very dear friend. It's somebody that I mentored. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the same hospital that we both were in. And he lost his life just at age like 32, just a couple of years ago when his heart failed, right? And he's had congenital heart defects his whole life. That keeps me going because I'm here. I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm productive. And whatever physical pain I have, I'm alive. And so that has always been my perspective, is like, I can't live life sitting on a couch. I know a lot of people do, and there's a lot of reasons why they choose to or unconsciously choose to. But for me, it's always been a choice to lean in and show myself what's possible. And what I would say is that the longer time went on, the more I realized how much pain so many people are in, and how many people have attempted for years with coaches, with counselors, with therapists to like do the work. And I'm saying it in quotes because they weren't pathways that led them anywhere else other than being more aware of all the ways they should be judging themselves. Right? And the level of suffering that exists that leads to a crazy suicide epidemic in these last few years. You know, in the few years leading up to when I actually made the decision to exit my old business and do this full time, I lost 6 men I knew to suicide. And just last week, I had 3 conversations with people regarding suicide, 2 of them who were contemplating it, and 1 who had recently lost a loved one who took their own life. Who am I to sit on the couch when I have an opportunity to influence, impact, or save people's lives? Bring more meaning into their lives? Like, that is a huge element of what motivates me. And now that I'm a father as well, I never want my 9 and 10-year-old to see me hit the easy button just because I can. Right? Now, that doesn't mean I also want them to believe that life has to be hard, that they have to fight through everything, that there has to be pain for it to be worthwhile. Because, by the way, those were all flawed narratives I had. Right? Hitting the easy button doesn't mean that those things, right, that you escape them. Right? But what I don't want them to ever see me do is to be passive when I can be active in a choice. And if I'm in a position to create influence, to create connection, to create healing, whether it's on an individual or a broad level in communities, that's what I was put on this planet to do. I believe that's why I was given the chances and second and third and fourth and fifth chances that I should be dead. And that's the time I'm using the word should, not from a shame and blame perspective, but like, you look at my life and all the stuff I've been through, it's a blessing I'm here. And so I also reference the quote that most people know, popularized by the movie Spider-Man: to whom given, much is expected. To whom much is given, much is expected. And the removal of expectations, ironically, has been a huge growth area in my life. So I don't carry it through the lens of expectation from a pressure, but more expectation from what my capabilities are, and that I'd be doing myself and those around me a disservice if I didn't continue to get up and demonstrate what's possible. The fact that I'm pain-free for over a year after nearly 31 years of daily physical pain, many times in my life when it was nearly debilitating, like it shatters what most people believe is possible. To know that I've repaired anger, deep levels of anger, to the fact that I don't even feel resentment, frustration, or angst in most situations at all anymore. Repaired and saved my marriage, reversed generational patterns in my home, to the fact that my kids don't even remember having an angry dad. And now we're doing reverse generational work with the people that raised us, right? Like, to show what is possible. When so many people said I'm crazy, you're going to leave this huge cash producing business to go try to help people see what's possible. And then 4 years later, they're hiring me to help them because they've seen what happens, right? And so I really genuinely believe when I say my purpose is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs, I mean that in every way, because I am the man and the mirror. I'm the man in the example that I cast, and I'm the mirror in the reflection I cast back to people with the trash from their past so that I can show them the path to set themselves free. It's not about me. It's about them.
Exactly. And you know what I learnt? I was actually in a podcast many years ago that I had this awakening where I kind of was telling my story of all these things that had gone wrong in my life. I'm like, why the hell am I telling people all the failures? And I just sat there in that for a minute and I went, and I got one of the downloads that I was telling you about. And it basically said the growth is not in the fall. It's about getting back up again.
Bingo.
And it's how we react to a situation. It's not the event itself. It's how we react to it. So this is where resilience is born, in that moment where you make a choice. And it is a choice to react differently and take a different path. And we can either choose to sit there in the shit, or we can get up and we can put one foot after the other and write a different story.
That's the truth. That is the core lesson my father taught me. And he taught me many, but this is the one I reference and credit to him the most. He says, no matter what, never fails, always guaranteed in every situation in life, you will always have a minimum of two choices. Now, they both might be shitty choices. I've tried to shut these reactions off on my screen like 50 times, and yet they still show up. So whenever I do the peace sign, I get balloons. And so now I just celebrate it. But he always said, you'll have a minimum of two. And I've not found a situation where that's not true, right? I mean, you could get held up at gunpoint. Your choice is to get shot or hand over your worldly possessions. But I see a third option. I can have a conversation with somebody to get them to lower the weapon, right? Like, there's multiple opportunities if we realize that, like, there are multiple ways to do things regardless of what the world's told us. And I grew up in a house where there was one right way to do everything.
Yep.
Right? So I had to really learn what this looked like to be able to broaden my own perspective and realize that there's probably 50 ways to do anything. It's just a matter of understanding how do we want to apply it for ourselves. But again, the power and the ownership comes in the choice, because that is what allows us to not be passengers and allow life to happen to us. It's where we can start to actually make active choice in creating and influencing the path and direction we want in life.
And this is it. No matter what has happened to you, or the circumstance you've been in, and I'm using air quotes in that because sometimes it does happen to us and other times we create it. No matter what the event is that's occurred, we do have the opportunity to let go of the shame and to rise above. Now, I know there's some really incredibly horrible things that happen to people that are not their fault. They have no control over it, but where true healing comes is knowing that you are not that event. You are not what happened to you.
Bingo.
You can have a
Ryan
whole new
Holiday,
identity.
it has one of my favorite quotes. He says, There is no good or bad without us. There's the event that happens and the story we tell ourselves about it.
And this is it. Our mind is so great at telling a story that's not a reality.
But it's more than even just the mind, my friend. And that's where it gets really hairy for certain people, because our minds, our emotions, and our physical body all do that. Right? And so being able to distinguish and separate between them is real. I'll give an example. When I am tired, physically fatigued, run down, it can feel like a shame, a scarce type energy, because my body is literally like locking up in moments, right? And so just like 3 weeks ago, I woke up in the morning and I felt super low frequency, but it didn't make sense. I'd gone through the thinking about my thinking about my feeling my thinking, and feeling my feeling. I recognized that there were no narratives, no beliefs, no thought processes that were happening here or in my heart. My body was run down and it was trying to convince me of something that wasn't real. And so you're right, our minds can create stories, but so can our emotions, and so can our physical bodies, because the cellular memory that causes us to actually react happens in conditioned moments multiple times over life. And so we can feel a physical reaction, and even if we don't know the source of what caused it, it can immediately start creating emotions or perseveration and spinning in the mind that's actually a result of a physical sensation, not the other way around. Now, our thoughts and our emotions can also create physical sensations, and vice versa. But it's super important, because it's not just the way we think. It's the way we think, it's the way we feel, and it's how in tune we are in our own bodies, and how much work we've done to complete that 18-inch journey from our head to our heart so we can see things more clearly.
You know, something I've learned over time, I've done like quite a bit of somatic work with a couple of therapists, and one thing they've said to me is that they've never known someone to have such great awareness of their body, like to to the point where you can feel one muscle, you can feel one organ, like,
Yep.
and you can locate it, you can like just pinpoint precision. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I've got in touch with myself. I know, I'm aware of me. But there's so many people who aren't. Like, they can't describe a feeling. They don't know where it is. Just to even isolate something in particular, to be able to understand it. There's so many people who can't do that. And self-awareness is becoming an art form. It really is. And it's something that if you can't nail that, it really holds you back. Have you found that?
It's totally true. And, here's the thing. I can speak from it from both perspectives, because I have people who tell me the same thing today, but I did not have the same ability to be able to get so specifically focused in any particular area of my body 15 years ago. I did have the ability to be in my body to understand the physical healing. But when I told you I shut off mental pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain, here's what it looked like. I had armor that cut off right here, and I wasn't aware of anything below my head, right? So I had that's what I call intellectual armor, which is where I think a large portion of this world lives today, right? They think through everything, and therefore everything becomes thought and spinning, right? There's perseveration that people get stuck, and all the worst case scenarios start popping in. But here's the reality. Most of the time, there's a physical reaction that has some physiological response that's tied to a deeper emotion that, if you're aware of it in the moment, you can have. But most people skip those two steps and go right to their mind, right to perseveration. And oh, by the way, I used to do the same thing. Because why? The world positions and promotes mindset, mental toughness. I mean, so much of even the work internally, it's like, oh yeah, you got to get your mind right. Mind's just one of the components of it. Like it's the way that we connect it. But here's the reality. Our emotions connect our subconscious mind to our body. It's how we express who we are. It's how we move through the world energetically. But most people don't have any sensation or perspective in their bodies. So often in my work that I'll do with people, one of the questions I'll ask is I'll get them into a moment And I'll start just asking, like, okay, great. So when this happened, when this person said this to you, when you felt this way, how did it show up in your body? More people can't answer it than can. And it shows me how disconnected we've become from our physical body and our emotions, and how much we live in our mind, which will keep us trapped forever if we stay there.
You've just reminded me, and I'm sorry to bring this up. I am going to apologize for it. You've probably heard of the TV show Married at First Sight.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got an Australian version here, and it is atrocious, but I got sucked into it this year, and I was like, I can't believe I'm watching this trash, but it's good fun. Anyway, there's this one couple when the therapist asks, how are you feeling about each other? This guy goes, yeah, good, nice. And it's like, what? As a partner, I'd be like, is that it? Is that all you got? Like, and nobody, like, if you've got this, energy that is inside you, that is a feeling that's sparked by someone else that could potentially be love, do you think, yeah, good, nice is okay? They just don't know how to connect. And I do believe this particular person was lying through their teeth, so they didn't feel anything close to love. But if you were, like, there's so many men in particular who don't know how to describe a feeling or what's going on for them. It's just...
I was 32 years old before I started opening up my emotions and my feelings. Right? And it started with this moment of joy that allowed me to realize that everything else I'd experienced to that point was pale in comparison, that I really didn't have the depth. And this is what I had to go through, an active process, which took the better part of 18 months before I could really understand it better, which was slowing myself down long enough to be able to recognize how much I was unconsciously suppressing. And if I could slow myself down long enough, just even if I could get a fraction of a second to actually connect to the emotion, I then just tried to expand that amount of time that I could actually experience it. Because unconsciously, literally, my body, my mind, my nervous system, by need to survive, created all of these ways to shut off my real experience because I couldn't handle it. I didn't have the capacity to focus on the physical healing in my body as well as understanding my emotions and my mind. And just with the level of trauma that happened, there was no way. I didn't have the capacity at age 7 in particular. And so I say all this because you're right, particularly men. Why? There's toxic masculinity that's promoted. My son just the other day, and in my own house, who he talks openly about his emotions, talks to others about it, made a comment about he didn't want to take Tylenol the other night when he had a really bad headache. And both my wife and I were like, what do you mean? And he goes, I don't want to take Tylenol. Why? If you have a headache, yeah, like I'm not the first to be like, just take meds just because you get it. I avoid them in situations as well. But I had to understand the underpinning to it. What was it? He believed that taking pills was a sign of weakness and that men don't do that. And his mom was the one that was like, dude, where do you get that from? Like, that's not how your dad is. Like, now I have a high pain threshold physically, and there's probably some subtle embedded things that he's witnessed in terms of my tolerance that he may want to try to be like. But I don't try to tough through stuff. I communicate about it, right? And so then we started to sit with him and just understand where it came from. Well, it's this subliminal messaging that he's getting from his peers, which are clearly coming from the men in their households. And so he's impressionable through the dynamic of it. But, right, it happened. My son's 10, and he lives in a home with a man and a woman who teach full understanding and connection to self. He has it. He's got crazy intellect, crazy emotional intelligence, and he's on the autism spectrum. So most people don't think that's even possible, but it is, right? He can communicate about it. 3 weeks ago, I walked in the house and he says to me, hey, Dad, I had a really hard day, and I noticed that I'm in a really reactionary place, and so I'm just telling you proactively so that you can maybe give me just a little bit of extra grace tonight. I need your help.
Wow.
Like, the same 10-year-old that said that 3 weeks earlier, 2 nights ago, was like, I don't take Tylenol because it's a sign of weakness. And it's like, whoa, you know what I mean? But that shows how powerful the narratives of the world are as well. And so many men are stuck because we've been told, suck it up, don't cry, be a man, toughen up, right? That's no way to live.
And you know, this is, I like to say this is the thing that separates us from animals, but animals do feel emotions too, to a degree. But I just think that there's got to be an education for people to help them understand this meat suit that we're living in. You know, like what they're getting now in terms of education is not enough. It's not enough. And I was just talking to my mum yesterday, we're talking about nutrition. And because I've lost quite a bit of weight recently, and I was like, man, the things I've learnt this time around, like if I'd have known them before, I would have made different choices. You know, we are not taught these things as kids. We're taught how to cook, all these kind of things, but we're not taught, you know, if you go to Macca's and have a Big Mac, there's your calories gone for the day, folks. That's it. That's not a treat. That's your day gone. So it's like, why are we not taught these simple things that are going to make our lives so much better? Like it's like the things that could really change everything.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're not taught to think. We're not taught to feel. I mean, if you use even a pragmatic example as it relates to the United States, the 1940 field book for the military had over 140 references to the human experience, which were mostly connected to emotions, trauma, reaction, how to feel, how to lead through this, how to help people and talk about it, how to get them through it. Today's field book, there's zero. Strategic leadership, tactical leadership, battlefield leadership. It's so systematized that it takes the human out of it when it's humans that are there. By the way, I also have to say I laughed a second ago because I have stolen your meat suit language, and I've reused it. I don't know how many times. And every time it comes out of my mouth, I'm attempting to give credit to where it came from. But it just comes out sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, we're in these damn meat suits, and I'm in flow downloading, and I don't always give credit. But I'm gonna formally say today on your show so that everybody knows, anytime anyone ever hears me say the meat suit, Bindi inspired that language. So thank you, because it's such a true statement.
And we don't know enough. And even the people who say they're experts and specialists, they don't know enough either. And
many of them aren't even congruent to what they teach.
No. And this is why I do what I do. And this is why I dig deep, because I'm like, surely there's more to this than we're even aware of. And I'm starting to pull back the curtains and show people that there is more out there than all this mainstream stuff and these systems and governance that half of which doesn't serve us. So it's
driven by fear, which leads to control, right? And anything that's different, people are afraid of.
Yeah.
Period. Right? And if we understand the Hawkins scale of frequency, shame is the lowest registerable at 20, right? Courage is 400, self-actualization is 700. But 90% of the world are stuck between 100 and 150, which are anger and fear, right? And so when we're dominated and living in an environment where so many people are afraid of anything that's different or anything that they perceive may take away their level of power, right? They create more levels of control, more levels of structure, more levels of oppression and constraint, because that's how they believe they'll be safe. Again, control is a byproduct of trying to create safety for ourselves. And so it's interesting because you're right. There are so many people that don't see the pathway, which is why, and even to your point, right? We aren't taught a lot of these things. And even in the frameworks and structures that we are taught or that we do have access to, not all of them really allow people to actually get to the depths of where they need to go or have a pathway to understand how to move through it, right? The language of these universal truths is not accessible to the masses in many cases, which is part of the reason I'm so heavy on this take out your trash language and why it lands so hard in so many of the rooms that we go into, because the framing of it and realizing all of the ways that this stuff disconnects us from who we are and what we want in our lives is the whole point, because it doesn't have to be that way. And if each and every one of us would even just take 5 minutes a day to look inward, even if that's all that happened, even if People didn't wake up after those 5 minutes after 5 years and realize that they've got deeper healing and more access to things and all. But even just 5 minutes a day of intentional awareness to go inward would change our planet.
Absolutely. Now, Brian, you and I both got fired up here today, which I always love. But I love the metaphor that sits around taking the trash out. And when you help people with that, metaphorically, it is labeling that stuff that they're carrying as not worthy of staying around anymore. You can let it go. You don't need to keep it. And it's very cathartic when you just throw it out, burn it, do whatever you got to do, but let that shit go.
Yeah. And do it regularly and consistently and keep digging until you actually find who you are and what you want in this world. You know, even using the example of it, it's like, if you dropped your wedding ring in a trash can, would you reach in and get it? If you dropped the keys to your parents' house in the trash can, would you deep get down and get it? If you lost your child's most cherished toy in the trash, would you go find it? Would you dig around and find it? Right? Like if you had a singular piece of food that would create all of this connection and opportunity for you and you found it on the top of a trash, would you eat it? Right? Like the reality of it is if we look in this physical world, there are things that people are willing to dig through the trash to get, save, and preserve in their lives, or to amplify and improve as it relates to their relationships, their time, their health, or their monetary riches. But when it comes to actually flipping the lid and taking a look inside our own proverbial can, people are afraid. Why? Because it's not fun to sit in your trash. It makes you literally feel like garbage in moments, and we don't want that, right? But here's the truth. Again, it's this concept of pain and suffering. If you don't want to feel like garbage, you got to dig through it. Because the other side of this is that most of your treasure is actually buried beneath and hidden behind all that trash pressure. And so how do we allow ourselves to actually get to the places that we need to go to live the lives that we've always wanted to but have not been able to access? It's in here, all of it.
So if someone's listening now, Brian, and they're like, okay, well, where do I start? I really want to make a change in my life. I want to get rid of all this crap and I want to be a better me. What's the first thing they can do?
I don't know if I said this on your last show, but if I did, then that's just really good repetition. And sometimes we need to hear things more than once for it to land. I have a really, really simple exercise that I would say is designed for the masses, for the average Joe, for anyone to access and start to ask that question. I want people to make 2 lists. Okay? On one list, I want you to write down all the people, places, sources of information, environments, things that you consume, anything that's in your world today that lights you up, that gives you love, that gives you energy, that fills your bucket, that you could spend 8 hours and it felt like 1 because you're in flow and you're connected. You can't wait to get back to see those people, can't wait to do those things, can't wait to be in that environment. Like, write it out. Get really, really clear on that, right? What moves you? And spend more time there. The second list, all the people, places, sources of information, environments, anything that we have in our lives that make us feel defeated, unworthy, disconnected, operate in low frequency energy, feel like there's resistance and energy drain, that 1 hour could feel like 8 and you cannot imagine slamming your head against the wall anymore, going back to see that person, being in that environment, because it just feels gross. Most people have no idea what percentage of their life exists on both lists. And the majority live and exist in low frequency, yucky energy for months and years. But when you bring a place of conscious awareness to it, I want you to eliminate, remove, refine, restore, repair as many of the things on this negative list as you possibly can, and spend as much time, energy, and focus over here as possible. Now, to get to live over here, you're going to need to remove your trash systematically over time and continue to dig deeper, right? Like, it's just a reality. But I used to feel in that low energy, low frequency energy and emotion literally for months and years. And then it became weeks and months. And then it became days and weeks. And then it became hours and days. And now it's minutes and moments. right? If I get triggered today, I'm human. It's going to happen. There's cellular memory at multiple levels that I'm continuing to raise my awareness around. But I'm human. But I also, again, going back to our concept of choice, can choose in that moment to separate from what's happening to me versus what is actually real. And I can reconcile and release things almost instantaneously that I used to carry forever. Guess what? Here's a little life hack. You want more energy? You want more time? You want more capacity? Get rid of the shit you're carrying that no longer serves you. And you will just inherently live and exist in a higher level frequency in all the positive energies and emotions that you desire, if you're intentional. And when you do that systematically over time with tools, resources, and guides that can help you get there, before long, you're all of a sudden living the life that you thought was impossible. You thought you'd never be able to reach, but really it was just outside of your grasp. You just needed one slight nudge to be able to grab it.
I love that, Brian. And you've reminded me now, it's been a number of months since we last spoke, right? Maybe 6 months, maybe? Thereabouts?
Yeah, probably somewhere in there.
Maybe.
I lose track of time. I'm not good as it relates to timelines in our man-made construct of time anymore.
Yeah. So it would have been at least 6 months or more since we last spoke. And I don't know whether you've seen a difference in me and my circumstances since we last spoke, but I've let go of some of the shit that I was hanging on to. And boundaries are a big thing. Boundaries. Huge. Absolutely huge.
Yes.
And honouring yourself and showing up for yourself were the big things for me. So to actually go, you know what, this is going to hurt, but I got to do it for me. And that's all that matters. So I clearly articulated to the people involved that if I'm in a place where I'm not being heard, seen, understood, acknowledged, and valued, I walk away. And that is what I did. And then they tried to throw shame, trauma, all kinds of stuff.
Not just physically, but also energetically, my friend. You're lighter, and you're shining more light as a result of it. And so I want to honor you and say thank you for the work you've continued to do, because I also know the ripple effect through you and other people. You said boundaries, and you saw me like light up for a second, right? Because this is something I want to share before we wrap our conversation today, if it's okay, because it's highly relevant, right? Most people who even think they're setting boundaries are actually operating from a place of armor, okay? Armor protects pain. Boundaries are a communicated contract that exists based on your clear existence. If you don't do the work to know who you are, what you want, what you're willing to do, your heart, your soul, your desires, right? How can you ever be clear on communicating an effective boundary and holding people and spaces in it? And I recently saw a quote that I'm going to butcher. It's not going to be perfect, but it was something to the effect of, if someone in your life is setting and establishing boundaries, it's not them trying to push you out of their life. It's them attempting to keep you in it. Boundaries are healthy. And they are a respected line, but they have to be established and communicated early and reinforced often. But they also can't exist without clarity. And so you got more clarity, and that's why you can communicate so beautifully around, if these things happen, I'm walking away. You've set that expectation up front. Now, if somebody reacts to it when you do it, I'm sure you're going to find a way to diffuse and move through that, knowing you. But the reality of it is you basically will be only confirming and reinforcing the boundary you've already set in an attempt to maintain relationships that historically have been more damaging to you than your boundary is ever going to allow.
And this is it. If people can understand, it's not a personal thing. It's people actually setting a space and also a standard for themselves, because
that's right.
You know, what you walk past, you accept. And I got to the point where I wasn't doing that anymore, because again, I'd be an absolute hypocrite if I did. So I don't do that anymore. So it can be absolutely freeing, like absolutely freeing. And when you let go of that stuff in your space, in your energy, it opens it up for more higher energy things to come into your life and manifest into bigger, greater things that you actually wanted in the first place.
Bingo.
Brian, last time we spoke, I would have asked you a question that asked you about the change you want to see in the world and how we can bring it to life. Given those months that have passed,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know if your answer is different today.
I don't remember what my answer was before, so you'll have to tell me if it's different, because I don't know, but I'll speak to my truth in this moment. The change I want to see in the world is a world where people don't have to hide. People don't have to protect. And we can recognize that we operate in an environment where we actually all want the same fucking thing. Right? And instead of having divisive, damaging levels of control and oppression and all of that that's a byproduct and ripple effect of people's need to be safe, I really do see this utopia that can exist where things aren't so difficult. We can actually all get what we want. We can honor and lean into people's unique abilities and honor that to allow ourselves to all grow. You know, I was reading something earlier today, and maybe people have heard this, maybe they haven't, but, you know, I do believe largely in this world, and I say this as a white male. We live in a largely patriarchal society in many parts of our world, and most of the time, or most of the influential power throughout our world has come from people with the skin color that I have. What does that give me the ability to do? I can be and blend in rooms in places that many can't, right? Which allows me to be a conduit for change, because what I also understand is what it feels like to be different, to be the only one in a room, to be looked at and had labels placed, to have limitations placed because other people can't see my capacity and capability through their own shit in my situation, right? And so as a result of that, I, in my reading, landed in this concept around this utopia existing ultimately through synarchy, not patriarchy or matriarchy, but ultimately allowing us to all leverage and lean into humanity and lead each other, right? And what that means is that in some ways, there's always going to be an element of hierarchy that exists in our world. But in this case, hierarchy would only be in terms of those that are maybe more capable to lead or are further along in certain journeys and those that maybe aren't. But love is the diffusing factor to all of it. Love is what connects it all. Love will diffuse fear, control, scarcity, and shame, right? And when we can recognize that we all experience the same things, then it's not about who's better or worse. It's about who has different abilities that can be additive to getting us all where we want to be. The change I want to make is to show that we don't need to fight fire with fire. We can literally dissolve it. We can put it out with water. We can show what love is capable of doing. And I believe that love is the ultimate neutralizer and diffuser for all negative energy in this world. But it has to start with self-love. And I want to show people what that looks like. And I also want to challenge those people that I have access to who have huge hearts but don't know how to bring it into the world. I'm going to continue to be a voice in ears, minds, and souls of influence so that I can show everyone at a variety of different levels in this world what's possible. Because I genuinely believe we can create a better world where we can all be seen. And not just seen, but appreciated.
And it all starts with us. I must have known something years ago, Brian. I must have. Now, Brian,
You clearly did.
I am keen for people to get in touch with you because you are a magnificent human. Can you tell us where people can go to find you?
Yeah. If you are online and you're a web person, you can go to brianbogert.com. There's speaking in there, our courses, our masterminds, our communities, all of it. If you're on social media, it's at Bogert Brian on all channels. So I keep it really simple and know that we genuinely care. We genuinely want to help you, even if it's not in a formal way. And so if anything you heard today moves you, if all you do is move it through the world by repeating it and sharing it, that's a gift to me. But if you need some help to support it further, that's beyond what Bindy's already doing for you in your world, then reach out to us and we can help support it.
Thank you again, my friend, for being a part of the ethical evolution and being a part of the change with me.
Thank you for being who you are and who you are to me, and for giving me another opportunity to pour into your world.
Thanks for listening to the Ethical Evolution Podcast. If you're ready to be the change and would love to work with me on finding your voice through spiritual coaching or creating your own podcast with impact, visit ethicalchangeagency.com. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's growing every day with great content and highlights you may not have heard on the podcast. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, and why not leave a 5-star review? If you're not following me on social media, you can find me at Ethical Change Agency on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and at DJ Bindy on TikTok and Instagram. If you're interested in diving deeper into the ethical evolution with me, I've created a membership program that allows me to bring you more in-depth exclusive content without relying on paid ads. My goal is to deliver members way more value than the cost of the subscription. Benefits include Ask Me Anything episodes. I've interviewed hundreds of people from around the world, so imagine what you could ask. Access exclusive bonus content only for members that focuses on the downloads I get through my conversations that include actionable tips. Support Ethical Change Agency and the Ethical Evolution Podcast on its mission to amplify change makers who make the world a better place. Access to global connections who can help you make greater impact in the world. Meditate with me, and discounted spiritual coaching or podcast consulting with me at 15% off. That value alone pays for your membership. For only $7 a month or $70 a year, you can access all these benefits of an Ethical Evolution Emergence membership. If you want to learn more and access these benefits, head on over to ethicalchangeagency.com.
Introducing the Deep Leadership Podcast. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former submarine officer who spent 22 years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Deep Leadership is real-world, actionable leadership advice from John and his expert guests. Become a leader worth following. Subscribe today.
Electricast.
Miles, are you ready to record our promo for Season 2 of the Wannabet podcast?
David, have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Miles, we're not here to quote lines from Airplane. We're here to tell people that Season 2 starts August 18th.
But I like Airplane.
I know you do, but Wannabet is a sports betting podcast. Each week we bet $1,000 on the NFL teams and games that we love.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It is fun. And last year you picked over 60% of your games correctly.
How'd you do?
We're not talking about that. We are telling people that they can find us every Friday. So no more movie quotes.
Roger.
Electricast.